Hey everyone. No, the title isn't a joke. Well, I mean it is, but I'm still gonna try to take this seriously. Today I'm gonna try to answer the question, can a Silverback Gorilla defeat the roster of Five Nights at Freddy's Ultimate Custom Night? The question stems from this post on Twitter and the subsequent fan art that was made shortly afterwards. Initial reactions to the question seemed very in favor of the gorilla. However, I'm going to try and use actual real-life gorilla statistics and information, as well as what we know of the animatronics from the games, to accurately determine if a single gorilla can defeat this roster of 50 characters. So, to begin, we first need to figure out how strong a gorilla is exactly.
C'est terrible ce qui se passe actuellement, on a loupé les deux grosses occasions du côté de Decay, du coup on se retrouve complètement avec ce bagarre. Le décalage incroyable! Oh là 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 là!
So we all know that gorillas are crazy strong, but are they really strong enough to take on a giant metal-possessed animatronic? Short answer, yes. Gorillas are the largest primates on Earth. They average around 5'11" and can weigh up to over 500 pounds. Their strength is said to be equivalent to roughly 9 healthy adult men. In terms of pulling force, they have the capacity to support over 1,800 pounds. That's heavier than a concert grand piano or even a small compact car. They also pack a huge punch, literally. The average gorilla punch delivers around 1,300 to 2,700 pounds of force, which is more than enough to completely obliterate a human skull. And they have incredible bite strength. Their bite force has been measured to be around 1,300 pounds per square inch, or PSI. That is double the bite force of an average human, and while this bite force isn't enough to tear through metal, it is more than enough to easily tear through any wiring, softer plastics, or fabrics. And finally, while it may not matter that much, it is still important to bring up that gorillas are highly intelligent. They have the second heaviest primate brain behind humans, and while they're not as adaptable as chimpanzees, they are also known to use tools. So in summary, gorillas are super compact beings of pure muscle and strength, and one of the deadliest animals on the planet. Okay, cool, we got the gorilla stats. Now let's talk about the animatronics.
Stay down.
Unfortunately, the FNaF animatronics stats and strengths are kinda inconsistent throughout the series, and there's not many actual measurements or stats that we can go off of. We do have the exact weights for the Funtime animatronics though, thanks to the sister location blueprints. Using these and assuming the other animatronics in the franchise are similar, we can say that the average FNaF animatronic weighs around 393 pounds. I know it's not perfect, but it's something. Now back to feats. Like I said, it's inconsistent. In the FNaF 2 movie, Toy Chica crushes a man's skull. To do this in real life would take roughly 1,100 pounds of force to even fracture it. However, in the FNaF 2 game, another toy animatronic, Mangle, is said to have been dismantled by literal toddlers.
It's scary, so they redesigned them to be more kid-friendly and put them in Kids Cove to keep the toddlers entertained, you know. But kids these days just can't keep their hands to themselves. The staff literally had to put Foxy back together at the end of every shift.
And remember that in FNaF 3, Afton single-handedly destroyed the original 4 animatronics as a human. Also, I am aware that the games and movies are two separate things, but I feel like I should give these animatronics everything they can get because we don't actually see them doing much in the games. Something we do see in the games, however, is an impressive display of mobility. Foxy can run and leap into the air. Springtrap, despite rotting in a room for decades, is able to run pretty stealthily. And then you have whatever the puppet is doing. And it's important to mention that the Funtimes in particular have been intentionally designed to kill. Intentionally designed to kill children, but point still stands. They have also been shown to be very intelligent. They tricked Michael into getting scooped. So very generally, FNaF animatronics are strong but dismantleable depending on the character. Okay, now that we have a general understanding of the two parties, let's compare. We established that the average animatronic weighs roughly 939 pounds. The average Silverback Gorilla weighs around 430 pounds, and since this is a 50v1 fight, we're going to be generous and go on the higher end of gorillas, with the male Eastern Lowland Gorilla, which can clock in at over 500 pounds. One of the stronger animatronic feats we've seen from the Ultimate Custom Night roster was the Toy Chica skull crushing in the movie, which would take roughly 1,100 pounds of force. It's important to note that this took around 16 seconds to crush a skull, which would mean that this tactic would most likely not work on a gorilla, which has an even stronger and larger skull than a human. Speaking of movies, the babysitter's death in the first one is kinda crazy. Freddy being able to bite a human clean in half implies a bite force of around 4,000 psi, equivalent to that of a great white shark, much stronger than that of a gorilla's bite force. However, the scene in the movie doesn't really make much sense. How would she even be able to fit in Freddy's mouth to begin with? Of course, the obvious answer is supernatural ghost shenanigans. Which brings me to my next point. If this whole thing was just one gorilla versus 50 robots, I'd say that the gorilla easily wins this no contest. But we have to remember that these animatronics are possessed by ghosts, with some of them having clear supernatural abilities. The main one I want to bring up is Golden Freddy. The outcome of a fight between Golden Freddy and a gorilla would completely depend on how we believe his powers work. I mean, we're still not completely sure how Golden Freddy even kills you. One popular interpretation is that he simply looks at you and gives you a heart attack, like Sadako from The Ring. If this is the case, then there really isn't anything the gorilla can do, it's GG's. But, in the Week Before novel, it's implied that Golden Freddy kills you by touching the victim's head and forcing the words, "It's me," into their mind over and over. Now, if that's the case, would that type of psychic attack even work on a gorilla that can't comprehend it? Would it not just be random noise to it and just make it even angrier? This also relates to the Nightmare animatronics. Again, if we have the gorilla thrown into a Nightmare on Elm Street scenario where it really can't do anything against a literal dream monster, then it's screwed. But with the modern interpretations of the nightmares being fear gas hallucinations, then the gorilla would most definitely win. Gorillas are pretty chill unless they feel threatened, then they become extremely dangerous. If you pump a gorilla full of drugs that makes it feel threatened, it would not go well for anything in its immediate vicinity. And lastly, there's one more thing I want to bring up. Keep in mind that the majority of these animatronics are children. It would be pretty safe to assume that most kids would be terrified at the sight of a hostile gorilla. I believe that fear would definitely impact their ability to fight back. Alright, so taking all of this into account, I think we can safely say that a gorilla would definitely win against pretty much any Ultimate Custom Night character one-on-one, assuming the limitations of the supernatural abilities we discussed. However, the question was, could a gorilla beat the entire cast of Ultimate Custom Night, which implies it would be fighting them all at the same time. In my personal, admittedly gorilla-biased opinion, I think he'd win. Let me break it down. So here's what he has to go up against. First of all, we can get rid of the non-factors, the characters who really couldn't do anything to the gorilla in the first place. That immediately takes out Old Man Consequences, Trash in the Gang, Helpy, and Phone Guy. Next, let's get rid of the supernatural threats that, as we established before, may not have any ability to affect the gorilla in the same way that it can a human. In fact, as I theorized before, something like the nightmares may actually make the gorilla more dangerous. That leaves purely physical threats the gorilla has to deal with. Starting from the top, we know that Afton was able to easily destroy the original 4 animatronics by himself. If he, a regular human, can do it, then it should be no problem for a 500-pound gorilla. I'd say this logic applies to the Wizards as well. Now, the toy animatronics should be in a similar boat. Like we said before, even if they're strong, the fact that they're able to be dismantled by children is a severe weakness. Makes them kind of like a glass cannon, but unfortunately that cannon realistically wouldn't be able to significantly hurt a gorilla in time, so they're out as well. Next, I want to bring up the gorilla bite force again. If you remember from earlier, that bite force of around 1300 psi can easily destroy anything with exposed wiring or soft materials. This eliminates the Puppet, Ennard, Molten Freddy, and Scrap Baby. Now, I will say everything left over will definitely be a challenge. However, I think we can safely eliminate both versions of Afton. Him being old and withered doesn't help, and as far as we know, he never even killed anyone who put up a fight. Factor in that he would probably be terrified of a gorilla, and I think that this is another easy win for the Silverback. Same goes for Lefty. I don't see what she can realistically do against a gorilla. Now, in terms of everyone else, sheer numbers might be enough to take down the gorilla. I mean, over 6,000 pounds of pure metal versus 500 pounds of muscle doesn't seem like that fair of a fight. And I will admit that from here, the animatronics could very well win against the gorilla. However, there still is a chance. The gorilla still has its trump card. The Gorilla Punch. 2,700 pounds of pure gorilla force could, in theory, take out an animatronic. Or, at the least, significantly damage it to the point where it can't fight back. In fact, I'm confident that it would definitely take out the cheaper built knockoff animatronics. Also, the Rockstars seem pretty similar to the toy animatronics, so let's knock those guys out too. That leaves the Fun Times, Music Man, and El Chip. El Chip we can throw out using the toy logic, and Music Man, I just don't see any way he could even attack the gorilla. Hit him with his cymbals, I guess? Either way, I think it would be too awkward, and the gorilla could just most likely rip off his thin, dangly limbs or something. And with the remaining fun times, yes, with sheer numbers they might be able to overpower the gorilla, but again, if the gorilla is able to preemptively punch them or use its crazy pulling strength to rip them apart, I think the gorilla can take this one as well. And there we have it. Yes, a gorilla can, in fact, defeat the FNaF Ultimate Custom Night roster. Yes, there are many ways the gorilla can be killed, and we did have to interpret the logistics of Golden Freddy and the Nightmare's supernatural powers in the gorilla's favor. However, I just wanted to see if there was a chance that the gorilla could come out on top, and I'd say there is. I'm aware of the gorilla bias, but to be honest, it would be a pretty quick and boring video if I didn't have one. So that concludes it. If you have your own arguments as to why or why not a gorilla would win this, or if you think the gorilla can take on more characters in the FNaF universe, let me know in the comments. Shout out to my amazing channel members. This week we have 2 new members. Welcome to Jordica and Clousy. Also shout out to Sarah Lucino for being a 2-year member. And of course, as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like it if you liked it, subscribe if you really liked it, and I'll see you next time.